All right, well, welcome back. My name is Julio Quiralte. I am one of the career specialists here and see a lot of familiar faces. So thank you for coming back. Today, what we're going to be talking about is how to have a successful virtual interview. Something we're kind of learning is that for some people, this virtual world is working out really well, and this may be sticking with us. So it's even more important now to make sure that we have good setups and we understand kind of what this process is going to be like. So even though we had an interview presentation a couple of weeks ago, I thought it would be important to kind of take it to the next level and piggyback on some of the things that the recruiter from Madison gave us, but also just kind of talk a little bit more about the virtual component. So let's go ahead and get started. As I said before, my name is Julio Quiralte. I'm one of the career specialists. I kind of work primarily with the College of Science and Engineering Technology. This year, I'm also working with the College of Business Administration and Humanities and Social Sciences. So kind of the whole gamut of majors, and I'm okay with that. It keeps it interesting. So a few things to keep in mind. We don't want to get relaxed about the idea of this being virtual, so we can be a little bit more casual. Unfortunately, we have seen this where people will show up maybe in a t-shirt to a virtual interview. Maybe the surroundings are not as distraction-less as they should be. We've done some mock interviews in cars and in the LSC. And so you definitely want to be mindful of having the surroundings be exactly what they should be. And like I said earlier, this format may be with us for a while. It makes it easy for recruiters to interview people from other areas, especially if you're maybe posting a position that doesn't have traditional work hours and they are okay with maybe interviewing somebody from the other coast, then it's perfectly fine to have an online virtual interview, because you may not need to have that person come in person. And one of the most important things that you really need to keep in mind, if you were with us with the resume presentation, we talked a lot about the relevance of your resume as it relates to the job you're applying to. Well, the interview should be kind of the same. You really want to highlight the skills that are most relevant to the position you're applying to. And so sometimes we don't have that, and that's fine. We could still focus on the main content and talk about a related experience that may not be as relevant to the job, but can still kind of highlight the skill or the transferable skill. But whenever we have that relevant work experience, those are the examples we want to use in our answers. And we'll talk about that as we go through. So we have to keep in mind that the purpose of the interview is it goes both ways, but primarily as the employer, human resources, or the hiring committee chair, what we're trying to find out is, are you the right person for the team? Do you have the right skills, the right temperament, the right personality for not only our team, but maybe our company? And so once you submit a resume, they see what you've done. They've seen where you've gone to school. They see all that, but they don't know who you are. And so that's the important thing that they really want to get from the interview is what are you like? And I can tell you, as somebody who's been on hiring committees, when the resume doesn't match up to the person that is being interviewed, like it's a big disappointment. And so that's why it's so important to always be on your A game when you go into the interview. So the 5 tips for the successful virtual interview: research, planning, execution, the STAR format, and the thank you note. So we're going to break these down and kind of go through this so that you have a better understanding for what all of these mean. But when we talk about research, it really all boils down to understanding what the position is, and that information is there. It's in the job description, so there really isn't a whole lot of guesswork to what they're asking you to do. The job description is your format and formula for what should be on your resume. So understanding how you're creating your resume is also really giving you tips on what you should be thinking about when you're thinking about answering the interview questions. So research. It's just the most important thing that you'll have to do. And for most of you who are about to graduate, that means that you're going to have to do research on maybe 5 to 10 different companies, or maybe, you only spend a lot of extra time on the company that you're applying to. But in looking around, you may look at companies that are competitors or in the same industry. And so understanding what one offers versus the other, or, just understanding the differences of companies is also good knowledge for you to have when you go into interview. The second tip, it really revolves around the actual day of the interview. And we'll go into this a little bit more, but really what we want to make sure is that you're prepared. A lot of what you're going to do for a virtual interview is going to be very similar to what you would do for an in-person interview, meaning you're going to have the right look, you're going to have a notebook with you, you're going to have questions. None of that changes, but there's a whole other component in that now you have to control for your environment. Now you have to control for your lighting. The Wi-Fi issue is certainly something that we've all probably had issues with since we went to working and studying remotely. So we really need to address all of that. And maybe by now you have a pretty solid plan, but it is important to have a plan B, because if on the day of your interview, your Wi-Fi goes out, your electricity goes out, then you need to have a backup plan. So the third part is the execution of all this. And that really just boils down to, how are you presenting yourself? Are you dressed appropriately? Are you making the right eye contact? We'll talk about this in just a little bit. I remember, finishing school, and, you're nervous about going out to get a job, and you're not really sure if you're qualified. And we can create all these kind of scenarios on why we won't get the job. But you have to get past that for that 1 hour that you're going to be interviewing, because it's scary. That's perfectly fine, but you have to act confidently, but not too confident, humble, but confident in order to represent yourself in a good way and make yourself seem like you're the right person for that job. So when we talk about researching the company, we really want to make sure that we understand what the company stands for. What are the things that you want to know? Is diversity inclusion important to you? Okay, well then look at their website and what kind of pictures do they have on there? Are they open to people of different ethnicities or different lifestyles? What is the way that they represent themselves to the community, whether it be through social media or the things that they sponsor. Those are the kind of things that you want to look for. If none of that's important to you, that's fine. But you also want to be mindful of what kind of reputation do they have for their employees. Do you know people who work in the company, and what do they say about upward mobility and a work-life balance? What about the ability to have flexibility to leave or change your schedule? Those are the kind of things that you want to know about any company before you apply or you decide to take on a position like that. If you're going into an industry like hospitality, then you know that the nature of the business is really customer service. So if you have a background in customer service, then you really need to start thinking about different scenarios that you can pull from in order to answer interviewing questions. And we'll talk about that in just a sec. But if you're making a transition from, say, retail to banking, well, depending on the position that you're applying to, whether you're going to be dealing with customers or you're going to be in the back strictly doing administrative work, then the skills that you're going to need to pull pull from and the experiences that you'll need to pull from are going to be very different. Now instead of customer service, maybe we're focused on communication and teamwork. And so you want to think back to your work experiences where you can highlight those skills and show that you have them and you can use them at a high level. So let's start with the environment. This is a picture that I've used a lot because I really like the difference that it highlights. And I'm sensitive to the fact that we don't always have the ability to have a desk in front of a window, but on the right, you can see the difference that it makes. And that's really the best way you want to show yourself in natural daylight. Ideally, you would have a plain background so there's no distractions. Not that this is really bad, but sometimes you do get people who will be looking at the camera or interviewing you, and they'll start looking around and trying to figure out what's up with the coral lampshade and what's under that lamp. And so you don't want anybody to get lost in that, because then they're not really paying attention to what you're saying. On the left-hand side, what you see is something that we see a lot, is people with lighting in the back, whether it be the window or a lamp, which messes up the light, the reception for the camera, and it makes you look darker. Generally, we tell you don't turn on the ceiling fan if you have one on, because that can create issues too. And you definitely don't want to have too much shade on your face, because it really kind of distorts what you appear like, and you don't want for someone to, and trust me, we've seen it in the mock interviews that we do. Sometimes the interview starts and the student looks pretty dark because of the shading, and we ask them to turn on a light or change the setting a little bit, and it's like a completely different person. So you definitely don't want to get strange looks on your first day, because your whole interviewing process was in the dark. For interviewing, especially virtual interviews, I would highly recommend that you dress professionally from head to toe. That means get rid of the pajama bottoms and the slippers, the flip-flops, and put on the dress shoes, match the socks. When you go all out in that fashion, your mindset will change. And the worst part is that you don't want to have to get up all of a sudden and they get to see that you're not dressed completely. And depending on what you're applying to, they may not be receptive to that. If you can't be serious enough or dedicated enough to represent yourself professionally for an hour, then they may read into that and they may think that you're not the right person, which may or may not be true. But you don't want to give anybody a reason to not give you a job. The camera angles are important. Ideally, we want to see your shoulders. We don't want to see a talking head. We want to see plenty of light. So in this example, on the far right-hand column, the second and third one, probably not the best ones. Again, you see the shading in the second and the gentleman just in there. You don't get a clear sense of who that person is. I know it sounds a bit extreme, but it really makes a difference. And so you just don't want to have that situation if possible. There's a lot of things you can do. You can sometimes have a white screen that helps illuminate your face. If you have a lamp, you can do something like that. Nowadays, they have the ring lamp. So there's a lot of options for you. And if you're graduating and you're going to start doing a lot of interviews, I would highly recommend that you maybe invest in something or figure out what's the best setup for you so that you're showing who you are and you're representing yourself well. And here, the one that I think might be the best one would be Ms. Donna over here, because even though she's got that picture in the background, it's plain. You're not reading into anything of what you see in the background, whether she's messy, whether she has bad taste, whether there's boxes. Like you don't have anything else to add to the reasons why you may not want to hire her. So it is important that you try to keep a blank, bare background. I meant to change this picture, but it is what it is. One of the things that you can do is minimize your Zoom screen and move it right under your camera so it looks like you're looking at the camera. And sometimes what we have is students who will contact us and say, if I'm being interviewed by 6 people, how do I make sure that I'm looking at all of them? Well, if you're trying to look at all of them, you're not making eye contact with any of them. So what you need to do is minimize your screen and move it right under your camera, so it looks like you're looking straight into the camera the whole time. We usually want to talk to a face, so you'll probably see yours, and you just talk directly at it, and it looks like you're looking at the camera, but you're actually making eye contact with everybody that's on that panel. So it is important that you figure that part out before you get started. So let's transition real quickly into the different types of interviews. Because right now what we're seeing a lot of is the behavioral based interview, which is all about, how have you dealt with things in the past? They want to give you scenarios so that you can explain yourself in a way that will let them learn more about who you are and to know if you're the right person for the job. The screenings are really popular right now. We've seen it in a lot of different industries, including healthcare, where they will send you an email. It has a link. There's a couple of questions that you need to answer, record yourself on, and then send it back. And that's it. That's the first round. And if you do well, then they send you an interview for the second interview. So there's definitely a lot to go by with the screenings, and so don't discount them just because it's 3 questions and you get done in 10 minutes. The one-on-ones, that's your more traditional interview. The peer group interviews are where you're being interviewed by the people that you'll be working with, and it gives you a really good opportunity to figure out who that team is and whether or not you want to be part of it. Panel group interviews are usually made up of people from different departments, and those can be interesting because sometimes you may not get the job that you apply to, but somebody else on that panel may think that you're a good fit for their department, and they may reach out and ask you to apply or want to meet with you. So I have heard of people who have gotten jobs that way. So it is an option, and so you want to make sure that you're being respectful to everybody who's on that hiring committee. If you can get all their names and get a sense for what departments they're in, it'll be useful at the end of the interview. And obviously the video interviews is exactly where we are right now. So when we talk about the behavioral based interview, we're really trying to figure out who is this person and are they the right person for our team. Every department, every company has some kind of culture, and they want to find people who will fit into that because they understand that if the office dynamic is going well, things will, they'll be productive. But if there is somebody who doesn't fit into that, they can really change that dynamic, which could lead to problems. And so it is important for employers to really get a sense for who you are as a person, because like I said, they've already seen your resume and they know, and if they brought you in for the interview, you did well enough on the resume to get through the doors. So the thing with the behavioral based interviewing is a lot of their questions is all about past experiences. So what you're going to hear are things like, tell me about a time, give me an example of, things like that. When you hear those type of words, you know that you need to go back and be able to pull some personal or work experiences that you can use for this answer. So we'll talk about that in just a second. But some of these examples are, tell me about a time you dealt with a difficult client, customer, or coworker. Any kind of scenario there you'll get. You'll usually get a question about a time when your work was criticized. They want to know how you deal with criticism. Is it going to crush you or can you bounce back? And then tell me about a time when your ethics were challenged. I've been doing this for roughly 11 years, and the ethics question usually stumped the majority of students that I work with. One, they don't have a clear understanding of what ethics is. And 2, their general response is, I've never been in that kind of situation, but the reality is that we all have. And so once we define ethics and then help them understand what that actually means, they realize yes, I've had a lot of those situations, whether it be at work, whether it be with a friend. It could be in any situation, even as a bystander. So it is important to think about what kind of ethical challenges you face, because you may have a question regarding that, and you want to be able to pull from that in order to give a good answer. When we talk about the fourth tip for a successful virtual interview, we are going back to how to answer these questions. And this is the STAR technique. STAR is an acronym for situation, task, action, result. And when you can answer in this format, you're gonna create a really good picture of who you are, which is gonna help the employer understand whether or not you're the right person for that team. And sometimes it's something that you're not even thinking about that can really make an impression on somebody on the hiring committee that makes them feel like, yes, that's the person we want. They get it. And so the more information you can provide, the better odds you'll have of getting the job. So this is a made up scenario of something that we hear pretty often. So you'll get a mock interview question will be something to the effect of, tell me about a time you dealt with an angry customer. So it's pretty general. So regardless of whether you've been in retail, in food service, in any industry, someone's been mad at you. You're the employee, they're the customer. How do you deal with it? So the typical answer we would get from a student would be, I was working at a restaurant and a customer was upset about their food taking too long. I talked to the kitchen and they were able to get the food out faster. It seems fine, but the reality is there's nothing there for me to understand who this applicant is. What skills do they bring? What kind of emotional intelligence do they have? What are their communication skills or abilities? And while the answer seems fine, the reality is that the student missed an opportunity to really highlight their skills. So when we use a STAR method, what we're going to lay out in the situation is explain that I was working as a server at a restaurant and one of my tables had their food delayed. The mother was very upset. So what is your task? Well, I knew I needed to assure her we were working to get the food out as fast as possible, but I also wanted to make sure she felt that I was listening to her. What actions did you take? I listened to everything she had to say and I apologized for the inconvenience. I also went to the kitchen to see what they could do to expedite the order. I talked to the manager to see if we could compensate them. So what was the result? And the result is so important because that's what employers want to know. How did you come out from all of this? So once the food came out, I quickly served the food and checked to see if they needed anything else. I also told the family that we were going to give them a 10% discount and I apologized for the inconvenience. So now we get a much broader picture of this person, right? We understand that they have customer service skills. We understand that they can diffuse a situation. They didn't rush back to the kitchen to give attitude to the kitchen staff. They talked with them. They showed teamwork. They were assertive enough to go talk to the manager to see if they could compensate them. So again, now we're showing customer service skills. And then you go back and you show some empathy and try to do the best you can to provide a good service to make sure that customer comes back. So when we lay out an answer like this, there's a lot more to get from the applicant. And when you do something like this in one of your answers, it really helps us understand, a lot more about you. And so that's why it's important to think about your work experiences that are related to the positions you're applying to. If you're in IT or you're a computer science major and you're going into work for a company where that's the kind of work that you're going to be doing, and you have that work experience, fantastic. Then that's your bread and butter. That's where you need to be drawing your answers from. But if you're going into a different industry, then you really need to take a step back and look at things on a more general term and think about, well, I may not have a situation where, we were working on a deadline, but I have worked on teams before and I can explain how maybe I got people motivated to get things done. And there is a way to answer most interview questions. The last thing you ever want to do is to say, I don't have an answer for that. So you need to think like a politician where you can pivot and really just still give an answer, even if you're not answering the question. So like I said, the STAR method really just kind of lays out the format, but there's a lot of information that employers will try to get from your answers. And so that's why it is important to have scenarios that are thought out, and be able to think about, how do I explain this in different situations. You don't need to have a lot. I mean, even if you had 3, I think you'd be perfectly fine. Sometimes I find that students will always go back to the same work experience or the same company. If it is in a different industry, you don't want to make it sound like that's all you know, and you don't want to make it sound like that's something that you really liked, because you want to sell yourself as you're the solution to the employer's problem. You bring all the skills necessary and you want to help them out. So remember to focus all your answers back to the employer that you're applying to and interviewing with. So the purpose of the interview, it really, there's so much information that employers want to get from you. You know, they want to understand your motivation. Do you really want to be at this company? That's important. Or did you just make the minimum requirements to get this interview and you made it through the first round, or you made it this far? There's a big difference between someone who's trying to get a job and someone who actually wants to work for this company. And you can see it right away in the interview. So don't sell yourself short, and don't compromise. Don't settle. There are jobs out there, so don't feel like you have to take the first thing that comes at you. If that's not where you want to be, if it's somewhere out of town, or if it's in a place where you don't want to work, skip it. Because going into a bad situation, you're not going to enjoy it. And then you may choose to leave in a month or 2 months. And it was a huge waste of time for both parties, especially for the employer, because employers will spend a lot of time and money in training, onboarding new people. And when somebody chooses to leave within a year, it could be like losing $50,000 to $70,000 a year. So you definitely want to be mindful of taking positions that you really want to do, not settling. But the interview also allows them to assess your communication. I've been in interviews where the applicant never made eye contact with anybody on the hiring committee. They just looked straight ahead. You know, and so you start wondering, well, what is this person going to be like when we bring them on board? Regardless of how awesome the resume was, if personality wise they're not going to fit, then either we move on to somebody else, or we just shut this down and then we try again. So we definitely want to make sure that you understand that you're representing yourself in the best way. And I can tell you, as someone who usually is pretty introverted, pretty straight-faced, when I have to interview, I got to smile, and I have to remember to smile and seem friendly and approachable, because I want them to feel comfortable with me. So if that applies to you, make sure you practice that. And the final tip, and you'd be surprised how often this is not done by an applicant, but if you can follow up with a thank you, at this point we're going with emails because nobody really writes handwritten letters anymore, or even notes. If you can follow up with a thank you email in a day or two, even that same day, that might be the thing that sets you apart from the rest of the applicants, because that's how few people choose to do something like this. So that's why it's important to get the names of the people who are interviewing you. And if you can find their communication, their email, or a way of communicating with them, you want to follow up with a quick thank you. And if there's any other questions that you have, please feel free to contact me. It's a brief note that you're just acknowledging that you appreciated their time and the opportunity to interview. And that's it. But like I said, and we've heard it from recruiters. Like when I had one recruiter tell me at a career fair, they met with 150 students, and of those 150, there was only 10 who submitted a thank you note to her, and of those 10, there was 6 that they were really interested in. So, guess who were the top 5 that were interviewed? So it is important that you take that time. And we don't always get the opportunity to get everybody's information, but if you can at least get the hiring committee chair, that's going to be your best bet. So as we wrap up, we got a couple more career coffee chats set up. Next week, we got a big one, which I'm pretty excited about, and I'm hoping that you guys will be able to attend. We have a recruiter. She is actually a recruiter from Lone Star College. And one of the reasons that I invited her is because Lone Star College has tons of positions and everything for business, for IT, and obviously for teaching. So tons of opportunities across the board. If you're in the North Houston area, you've got a lot of options when it comes to that college. So I hope that you'll be able to come back on that day, because I think that's going to be a really good one. And then the last one's going to be on salary negotiations. That's in 2 weeks. And so if you're an outgoing senior, I would highly recommend that you join us for that one, so we can teach you how to educate yourself on what your worth is. It is very rare that you will get a job offer at your interview, but sometimes, and this was something that another HR person told us last semester, if they like you, if you just wowed them and they understand what their budget is, they may make you a job offer that at that moment in the interview. And it doesn't mean that they're lowballing you, but it could be unsettling to get that kind of job offer at that time, because obviously you weren't prepared to receive it. And so knowing what your range is for salaries, if you felt like that interview went well and you felt comfortable enough to say, yes, I'd love to take the offer, fantastic. It's okay to say, hey, can I get 24 hours and I'll get back to you, just so you get some space to breathe? That's fine too. But understanding what your worth is when you go into these positions is a huge tool for you. For those of you who aren't familiar with our office and career services, we do a variety of things. Today was actually the last job fair that we were part of, but it wasn't here on campus. We also do a lot of career readiness programming. As you would imagine, we do a lot of help with resumes, cover letters, mock interviews. We have our peer career advisors who do that. So if you set up an appointment through Campus Connect, you'll be meeting with another student who's been trained to do this, and they all do a fantastic job. So I would encourage you, if you need help with that, go ahead and get that set up. And then we also have the RevaBot Career Closet. For those of you who are graduating, if you need professional workwear, set up an appointment through Campus Connect to go through the career closet and get some clothes. You're allowed to take up to 4 items every semester. So it's a really good way to build, or not to build, excuse me, to create a professional outfit for the day of your interviews. We are in Academic Building 4, Suite 210. We are working from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. We do have Wednesdays from 5 to 7. So if you need a late appointment, you can look online and set that up. But right now, for the remainder of the spring, we're still going virtual, so everything will be handled through Zoom. All right. So let me shut this down.